Welcome to the Chosen Few. On this channel, we usually analyze the casualty rates of the professional soldier, the men who signed up to face the fire. But tonight, the front line isn't a trench in the desert or a beach in Normandy. It's a terraced house in the Midlands. It's a kitchen table in London. Between September 1940 and May 1941, the civilian population of Great Britain became the primary combatants in a war of atmospheric attrition. While the British Army in North Africa was winning spectacular victories with relatively low loss rates, the people back home were being subjected to a level of casualty density that defies the imagination. 30,000 tons of high explosives, millions of incendiaries, 43,000 dead. But the numbers don't hit every city the same way. Tonight, we ask you choose a city. Are you following the story of Plymouth, the city with the highest mortality rate in the country? Are you looking at Hull, where 95% of the housing stock was wiped off the map? Or are you looking at London, the target of 18,000 tons of German steel? Choose your city. We are moving beyond the headlines to look at the three phases of the storm: the descent, the firestorm, and the butcher's bill. This is the Blitz. This is the Chosen Few. If you are looking for the most dangerous place to be a civilian in 1941, you aren't looking at London. You're looking at Plymouth. This coastal city, home to the Royal Navy's Devonport dockyard, holds the grim record for the highest mortality rate of the Blitz. At 0.53%, the statistics of Plymouth tell a story of concentrated lethality. To put that in perspective for this channel, in a single week of raiding, a civilian in Plymouth faced a higher statistical chance of death than many frontline infantry units did during the same period in the Western Desert. The descent in Plymouth was dictated by geography. On the nights of March 20th and 21st, the Luftwaffe didn't need complex navigation. They followed the silver reflection of the moonlight on the Tamar River. This was Mondnacht, Moonlight Night. The first wave didn't bring high explosives. They brought the light of death. Thousands of magnesium incendiary canisters, nicknamed Molotov breadbaskets, tumbled from the bays, igniting the city center. For the residents of Plymouth, the descent wasn't a sudden bang. It was the terrifying realization that their city was being turned into a glowing target for the heavy bombers trailing behind. Why was Plymouth so lethal? It comes down to casualty density. Plymouth was a compact, Victorian port. Its streets were narrow, its houses built of heavy stone and slate. When the second wave of 125 bombers arrived, carrying SC-500 and SC-1000 Satan bombs, the physics of the city worked against the people. In London, the sprawling geography allowed tonnage to be absorbed by parks and empty spaces. In Plymouth, there was no empty space. Every ton of explosives dropped had a high mathematical probability of hitting a human structure. The stone walls that residents thought would protect them became shrapnel. The most haunting data point of the descent is the communal shelter. On the night of March 20th, a single direct hit on a shelter at Portland Square killed 72 people instantly. In the world of the chosen few, this is what we call total erasure. An entire micro-community, grandparents, parents, and children, removed from the census in a fraction of a second. As the fires took hold, the people of Plymouth were trapped. To the south was the sea, to the north, the burning dockyards. There was no trekking here yet, no easy escape into the countryside. You stood your ground in a city that was being systematically dismantled at a rate of 0.1% of its population per night. By dawn, the smoke was so thick it was visible from the coast of France. 1,174 people were dead or missing. The mortality rate had spiked, but the city hadn't surrendered. The descent was over, but for the next city on our list, the physical world was about to vanish entirely. We move next to Hull, to witness the firestorm and the total destruction of the concept of home. In the logic of war, there are two ways to break a city. You can strike with the precision of a scalpel, or the weight of a sledgehammer. In this segment of the Chosen Few, we look at the firestorm through the lens of two very different targets. One is the most damaged city in the United Kingdom, a city the BBC was forbidden from even naming during the war. The other is the imperial capital, a target so large it arguably defied the Luftwaffe's ability to destroy it. First, look at Hull. If Plymouth was about mortality, Hull was about erasure. Hull was the most bombed city in Britain outside of London, but its statistics tell a unique story. With only 1,200 tons of bombs dropped, a fraction of the capital's total, the Luftwaffe achieved a near-total physical wipeout. 95% of Hull's housing stock was damaged or destroyed. Out of 91,000 houses, only 6,000 escaped the war unscathed. How does a city survive when 19 out of every 20 homes are hit? In Hull, the casualty rate was 0.38%. High, but not as high as the 95% destruction would suggest. The reason? The people of Hull cheated the math of the Blitz. They became trekkers. Every night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, tens of thousands of residents would simply walk out of the city. They slept in hedgerows, in haystacks, and in open fields miles from the docks. They surrendered their homes to the fire so they could save their lives. In the world of the chosen few, Hull is our case study in strategic displacement. The city died so the population could live. Then there is London. If Hull was a scalpel, London was the sledgehammer. The statistics for the capital are staggering. 18,291 tons of high explosives. For 57 consecutive nights, London was hit. It is the tonnage titan of our list. But here is the paradox. Despite receiving 15 times the tonnage of Hull, London's housing damage sat at roughly 15%. London was simply too big to die. Its sprawl acted as a natural defense. A 1,000-ton raid that would have leveled Hull or Coventry was absorbed by London like a sponge. But that absorption came at a horrific human cost. London saw 20,000 deaths, while the mortality percentage was lower than Plymouth's, 0.23%. The absolute butcher's bill was a national tragedy. This was a war of attrition where the force was the civilian population. The Firestorm in London created a new type of existence. The tube stations became underground cities. The logistics of keeping 8.6 million people fed, watered, and sane while 18,000 tons of steel fell from the sky is one of the greatest unseen victories of the war. In the desert, a general manages 100,000 men. In London, the government had to manage 8 million combatants, who were expected to go to work in the morning after spending the night in a damp tunnel. In Hull, the firestorm erased the physical city. In London, the firestorm attempted to erase the psychological city. One city lost its houses, the other lost its peace. But as we move into our final segment, we'll see that these aren't the only two stories. There are 7 other chosen cities where the lack of defenses, the density of industry, and the sheer bad luck of geography created casualty rates that would haunt the British Isles for generations. We've seen the mortality of Plymouth. We've seen the erasure of Hull and the endurance of London. Now, it's time to settle the accounts. We are moving to the industrial heartland and the unprotected ports to look at the final butcher's bill. We have looked at the outliers, the massive tonnage of London and the physical erasure of Hull. But to truly understand the butcher's bill of the Blitz, you have to look at the cities where the math of war became a local tragedy. These were the industrial crosshairs. These were the cities that didn't just endure the war, they manufactured the tools to win it. And for that, they paid a price that makes the desert campaigns look like a safe harbor. Take Coventry. If you were looking for a city to define casualty density, this is it. On November 14th, 1940, the Luftwaffe dropped 818 tons of explosives on a compact medieval city. The result was a mortality rate of 0.51%. Statistically, Coventry was nearly as lethal as Plymouth, but for a different reason. This wasn't about the sea, it was about the factory. 1/3 of the city's housing was made uninhabitable in a single night. When we talk about the chosen few, we are talking about the factory worker who spent 10 hours building engines, only to return to a street that no longer existed. Nearby, Birmingham took a different kind of beating. With over 1,800 tons of bombs, it was the 3rd most targeted city in Britain. It lost 2,241 citizens, a 0.22% mortality rate. While the percentage seems lower than Coventry's, The sustained pressure on the city of 1,000 trades meant that for 8 months, the threat of death was a constant, low-frequency hum in every workshop. Then we look at the gateways. Liverpool and the surrounding Merseyside were the front line of the Atlantic. If Liverpool fell, Britain starved. The Luftwaffe knew this, dropping nearly 2,000 tons of explosives. The cost was 4,000 lives and a 33% housing loss. In the borough of Bootle, that number reached a staggering 85%. In the world of casualty rates, Liverpool represents the high-stakes engagement. A 0.47% mortality rate meant that almost every family in the city was mourning a neighbour or a relative. South in Portsmouth, the Royal Navy's heart took 687 tons. With a 0.37% mortality rate and 20% of its houses destroyed, the service city proved that even with the best anti-aircraft defences in the country, you cannot fully shield a civilian population from a concentrated aerial assault. But perhaps the most sobering entry in the Butcher's bill comes from the cities that thought they were safe. Belfast is our outlier of tragedy. It received the lowest tonnage on our list, just 440 tons. Yet, it suffered 1,000 deaths. Why? Because of a lack of preparedness. With almost no public shelters and minimal air defences, Belfast's casualty-to-tonnage ratio was one of the highest in the world. It is a stark reminder for this channel. In war, it isn't just the size of the bomb that kills, it is the vulnerability of the target. Finally, we look at Glasgow and Clydebank. While the citywide mortality was 0.1%, the local data tells a darker story. In the small town of Clydebank, a 2-night raid destroyed all but 7 houses in the entire municipality. It was a 99% housing loss. The survivors didn't just lose their homes, they lost their entire social fabric. So, we settle the accounts. Total Blitz deaths, 43,500. Seriously injured, 50,000. Total houses damaged, over 2 million. Compare that one last time to the North Africa campaign of the same period. In the desert, the chosen few were soldiers, protected by armor, distance, and training. On the home front, the chosen few were mothers, children, and tradesmen, protected only by a brick wall and a gas mask. The Blitz didn't win the war for Germany. It didn't break British industry, but it rewrote the rules of casualty analysis forever. It proved that in the age of total war, the distance between the front line and the front door is exactly 0. So like we do every episode, I will now ask you to take a moment of reflection for the loss and tragedy of war. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.